Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 248. I am your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me is Josh Parham.
Hello, hello.
It's just us, Josh. I like it when it's just these episodes. It's just me and Josh. We're just sitting back. Everyone's busy, but we're here. And that's all that matters, right, Josh?
Yep. Talking about one of the greatest movies and franchises ever, I would say.
Franchises ever.
I there's issues, but I think that there is value in every single one of those movies.
We're here to talk about Alien Romulus. We're going to talk about that towards the back half of this episode. Front half, we're kind of doing what we did a couple weeks ago with Trap and Shyamalan. We're going to talk about the Alien franchise, the entity that is Alien. We talked a lot about Alien last week when we did the 79 retrospective, but since Romulus is out, we can have some full thoughts on the film in a more in-depth way. We can talk about its sequels, its prequels, its side quests, and everything in between, because literally Romulus is a movie that's in between. It's the meat of the aliens sandwich. And so I guess depending on this conversation, you're going to find out if you like anything inside that sandwich or if you just like toast. If I don't know how.
Or do you like every single ingredient in every sandwich ever made? Maybe you'll like Alien Romulus.
Maybe. Do you like a burger? Well, maybe instead we'll just give you a fast food one. How about that? We'll give you like these really great pieces of like artisan bread, and then we'll give you a McDonald's patty in between. And there's nothing wrong against that, I guess, but there does feel something artificial. We're already being catty right at the beginning of this episode. Josh, last week when we talked about 1979 and we gave Alien Best Picture, right? That's what we settled upon that. I was actually, shout out to Sophia. I was surprised that it wasn't a fight to the death to get all that jazz the win, but I'm still kind of amazed.
We gave all that jazz like 3 other awards.
That's fair.
It was very well represented.
She did talk to me this week. She's still very mad what we did to Meryl Streep, and I'm sorry, Meryl. But we're talking about a film that you and I really love, and I think a lot of people really love, which is the first Alien film, Ridley Scott's second film in his filmography. And Josh, you mentioned that it's one of your favorite films of all time. It's like in your top 5, right?
Yeah, if I were to make a top 5, it would absolutely be in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have to cite the whole script to me or scene by scene here. Though, if we had the time,
if I wanted to.
I was going to say, I know you could. But if you don't mind telling the folks that first Alien, when was the first time you saw the first Alien, Josh?
I mean, I was a kid when I first saw it. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but what's funny is that I have memories of not necessarily the movie itself, but I remember like things on the periphery when I was a kid that were related to it because my parents loved that movie, obviously. And I remember my dad telling me the scene when Dallas like goes into the vents and is hunting the alien. He was describing that scene to me when I was a kid, and I was just so like fascinated and scared and it just was like, well, what is this thing? I want to watch it. And I remember this isn't Alien, but it's Aliens. My dad was watching the special features, and it was one of the tests of the Alien Queen. And like I hadn't seen the movie, I didn't know what this thing was, but it's like, what I was just so curious of what this like giant monster was that was attached to this movie. And so I had this fascination with this film ever since I was very, very young. And then I want to say maybe like when I was 10 or 11 is when I finally saw it, and it just like blew me away. I loved the atmosphere that it was creating. I loved its vision of the future that is so rustic and grimy, and I thought it was so unique. And it was just a brilliant piece of horror cinema. And it really made me then want to follow more of Ridley Scott's movies and his filmography. And it really just cemented itself as like a film that it would be on a Friday night and I wanted to watch a horror movie. It would almost always be Alien. And I just devoured it. And the rest of the movies in that franchise, honestly.
It's one of those that I remember watching again late at night. It's kind of like you have to watch this movie first at late at night. You can't watch this during the day. Like it kind of diffuses the purpose of it. You got to watch it when it's really dark, and so that you can get really scared or really creeped out by it. It was like middle school, high school when I finally got around to it. And it kind of ruled. Like, and it still does. And it speaks, it's just a really effective horror film elevated by these elements of science fiction, elements of our existence and our own sort of downfall. I mean, I know that we were talking about Apocalypse Now last week. It almost has, you know, the themes of that. It's not necessarily stripped right from Heart of Darkness, but it has a lot of those, I think, themes with Inside Alien as well too, about the fear of humanity and fear within ourselves, and what our environment's going to do from us. At least that's how I feel. And there's that dread that just kind of, and overall, then how you survive through all this? And I mean, that alien creature, those creatures are some of the best practical designs you're ever going to see in a movie, period. Still are. That's why
Yeah.
when these movies are now made, Josh, it really makes me mad. One, because it's like, it doesn't see it seems really hard for them to make these movies back then. And it seems like we
Yeah.
have the resources to make it really easy for these people now. And I think that when we get into the CGI stuff, and we start talking about that in the later films, it takes away from, I think, some of the dirtiness, some of the workmanship, and the lived inness within these worlds, because it feels very lived in. It's some of the problems I kind of have with Romulus that we'll talk about later. But yeah, and I love that ensemble. There's something about just like a
Yeah.
great ensemble. I know I argued this last week. I'm probably going to get yelled at again by Josh. It's Josh pastime to yell at me on these shows. But I do really feel like that is an ensemble that then does form into one, like it's a survival piece, and everyone is a group at the start of it, and then by the end there is one person left. And then when you get to Aliens, it really is, I think, about, again, that one person who has survived, who is trying to tell everyone, hey,
Mhm.
this is not going to be easy, and this is not something to take lightly. And but I love, it was one of those things too of when I watched this younger, in my life. It was one of those, it's one of those movies too when you watch and you're like, oh, well, not all science fiction is Star Wars, or not all science fiction is certain things. Like, it can be very dark and very and kind of cynical and evil. And even though, there is survival at the end of it, right? Ripley survives at the end. There's a lot of consequence, and there's a lot of stuff to pick up after this. And I just think that something about Ridley Scott early in that career, that Blade Runner, that Alien sort of time period that he's in, he seems, I know it seems like it to say that it's my two favorite films from him are so early in his career, but he feels so controlled for a guy that's in his second and third movie. He's doing things with the camera that are absolutely insane in both of those movies. Um, it's kind of like the best horror movie you're ever going to watch, and yeah, you feel claustrophobic no matter how many times you've seen it. The 4K is good.
Yeah. I
It's
have
better
it.
than Aliens, which that's a little bit controversial this past week for what James Cameron said about the 4K restoration of Aliens in his other movies. Sorry, James, we just like some quality cinema, um, to get mad at us. But I don't know, Josh. It's um, it's a damn good movie. It's kind of perfect, and it's kind of hard to talk about. That's the thing about perfect movies, isn't it? It's kind of hard to talk about them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, perfect movies that have also been around for decades, so everybody has basically said every great thing there is to say about the film. And I think just the other thing about the ensemble, and I actually just mentioned this very recently in talking with some other people about Alien Romulus, is that what is so fascinating about the characters in Alien is that we never get a moment where somebody sits down and explains their backstory. We don't know the background of any of these people, like what they were dealing with on Earth or whatever. It is just they are here doing a job and that's it. But it's great because they have such good chemistry with each other. Everybody, all that interplay between them is so captivating that we don't need an entire backstory on any of these people to care about them because they're just so great in the moment. And I feel like that is what separates to me the good alien movies and the bad ones is how much do you care about the central characters?
Mhm.
And I think Alien, even though it doesn't give you much detail on these people, the actual characters themselves within this moment are so well defined and their interplay is so good that that's what makes it so much more interesting and has such a greater emotional impact than most of the other movies do.
No, I totally agree with you because it's again that lived in factor. Like we're jumping in. We don't need
Yep.
to. This is Ellen Ripley. She was from such and such, and I'm the cool girl, and this is this guy, and he's from here, and we're gonna, we don't, we already just kind of established that these people are on this mission. They have a lived in chemistry or vibe to them. And I think that then that helps you relate to them and root for them and want them to survive. It also
And
means
also
that
that they're there for not like any kind of altruistic purpose. Like they're blue
no,
collar workers. Like
yeah,
the movie to me is like they're truckers in space.
yeah,
That's what they are. And they're just getting pulled into this dangerous mission because the company is telling them to. But it's not like they're out there trying to find intelligent life for some deep scientific purpose. And that's another aspect about the science fiction that I love in Alien is that it shows you a future where space travel is not this grand thing that
no,
people do. It's just another job
yeah.
out there.
And it's honestly like it's a way to escape for sure, but you're still controlled and there's still rules and parameters. And then I mean, it's got, alien, it's got the, symbiont humans, played by like Ash, who's a robot who's like literally objective is more important than humanity. And then that's where, I mean, we'll talk about this probably with Romulus too, where it's like that dynamic of that being in there. And I mean, obviously, like we'd had 2001: A Space Odyssey already out, and so that in many other sci-fi films that have sort of introduced that,
Yeah.
but it felt more mono y mono here, and it adds this, then a secondary villain. It adds secondary tension. It adds even more horrific fact of like the realization that Ripley and this group has to realize is that they have been pawns this entire time. It's a very rough examination of capitalism at its finest, and the sort of the very cynical way in which we are all essentially cogs in a machine for a purpose that might be dangerous, might be better for us. We don't know, but we will clean up the damage after the body count has been laid down. And I think that that's what makes it so interesting still is like you can have a movie like this where it's just an alien movie. You can just see it for the action. But if you really start peeling back the layers of what Scott and the team were sort of creating here, it's ingenious commentary that you have
Yeah.
here. And
Rather
then,
subversive that
yeah,
you don't really kind of expect it to be in there. I love that commentary. And I also love that you don't know anything about this situation, which is an issue that I have with many of the other movies, is that I think one of the powerful things about Alien is that you don't know where this ship came from. You
yeah.
don't know anything about that space jockey. You don't know if the eggs are like, were they in the ship already? Did they pick them up somewhere? It's like you have no information. And because of that, all the danger is feels so unprecedented. Like anything can happen because you have no backstory of the situation that they are in. And I think that not having those answers is what makes that movie great and why I think some of the other movies are failures because they are trying to provide answers for stuff that doesn't need it. But I think in this particular instance, that's what makes it so viscerally powerful because it is unknown. And as we know, that is incredibly scary.
Then it obviously jumps into somebody else's hands. It jumps into James Cameron's hands Talk about one giant of cinema to the other.
Yep.
Big Jim. Um, I mean, the whole joke is he went into a room, right? Wrote on the board alien, put an S, and ran a dollar sign through it. And they were like, sold. Let's make more money. And
that was history.
And that was history. And then I kind of spawned what we have here with James Cameron now. He's one of the most popular directors, commercial and critical, I guess you could say, of all time.
Yeah.
Maybe little less critical.
I feel like all of his movies are pretty much
well received.
Critically, well received. Yeah. Like I can't.
It's not like a bomb in there,
outside of Piranha,
right?
I can't think of anything that critics did not like to some degree.
Yeah, I think that the varying degree of maybe the Avatar films for either one of the coin. Like some people like one, I didn't like one. Some people like two, I love two. Some people are the opposite
I think
way.
Generally speaking, though, people still were like, these are good movies. Maybe they don't deserve Oscar nominations, but I think,
but definitely people thought and see his movies. Josh, like people love James Cameron.
Yep, they do.
Took me a long time, but now I'm here, and I love Big Jim. And did you see recently that he went on stage at the D23, and he was cracking jokes about The Rock, and he released.
I did not see that. No.
And then he released the new title of the third Avatar film.
Oh yeah, because it's not the Seed Bearer anymore,
which is really just.
I mean, cowards. Yeah, we know.
Yeah, absolute fucking cowards. Fox would have done it easily. There's no question.
Was it Fire and Ash? I think is the name.
It's
of it
Fire and Ash.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, it's very on the nose. But it's no Seed Bearer.
Yeah.
And
when I saw that name change, I just had an image of the assassination of Jesse James when they're doing the play, and there's a guy in the audience who's yelling "coward" at Robert Ford. Like that was coward. Me. I'm just in the audience in the dark, just yelling "coward."
I would have loved to fly you all the way out to D23 just so that you could do that. By the way,
that reference was for you. Ryan,
yes,
nobody else is going to understand.
I know there's gonna be maybe like two other people that I get that reference. And then but I wanted Josh to just coward in a sea full of nerds. You know what I mean? Just like eating that slop up left and right. But no,
then James Cameron comes off. He rushes off the stage and tackles me. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? Of all the sequel announcements, that was the one I was actually excited about the most because it's the one created by its creator, and it's a continuation of a mostly original story. And he's at least he's earned the right to make those movies no matter how many or if we want them to. You know what I mean? So and The Way of Water kind of ruled. It made me cry. And it had a lot of the DNA from Aliens inside of it, especially in the third act in it. And this is Ripley's found, but then what is it? Like they essentially get like a group together to go back to this other planet to find more shit. And
because they lose contact with the colony that's established there, and because she's dealt with the alien before, they want her on as like an advisor,
as a liaison. Yeah, and that's where they find Newt, which miles varies depending on what you think of Newt as a character. People hate the character, people love the character. I think I like the character based on what it means for Ripley. And
I mean, because Newt is there to fill the mothering space for her because she lost her own daughters while she was in hypersleep. So I understand it with there. It's funny to watch the actress though, because since they shot it in England, there's a lot of people that they have cast from England, and every once in a while her accent slips through even as a child.
It slips through. It's like
that's kind of funny.
It's a little bit of that continuity thing. I think sometimes that Cameron's like, I don't give a shit about that. Let me just make this movie. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But overall, I like Newt. I think that she's a fine addition to that movie. And I like Aliens a lot too. And as has been said throughout the whole years of people have talked about that movie, one of the reasons why it's so great is because it very smartly knew that you couldn't just do Alien again. Yeah. And Cameron really decided, like, no, we're not just making the haunted house in space 2. We're taking this material and just making an 80s action movie out of it.
Yeah, we're making a James Cameron movie out of it. That's the beauty of it.
Honestly, this feels more like a James Cameron movie than the Terminator does. Like, and I love the Terminator,
Like
but
the first
if you
one or
look,
the second one?
no, the first one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because like the
Okay.
first one is, if you look at it, is more like a grounded, almost like horror movie. Aliens feels like the first James Cameron
Cameron
movie,
movie. Yeah.
big action spectacle, sci-fi, with these kind of big performances too, a big, very memorable characters. This feels like the really established, I have the resources to make a James Cameron movie now.
Well, I mean, it helps that he's got the budgets, right? Because
Exactly. Yeah.
he's Big Jim, right? That's his name. It'll be on the tombstone. It'll be Big Jim,
Yep.
right? And Big Jim don't do medium things. He goes big or go home.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like that's the reason why Terminator 2 rules over the first Terminator. Maybe not story wise,
Well, yeah, I
but in terms
disagree. I
of
still think Terminator 1 is actually better, but
oh,
we'll have that
we're not
conversation later.
we're never doing a Terminator retrospective series on this.
Are you going to do Cameron or have you done Cameron?
Well, no. Well, no. Well, Jay and I have done Cameron
Okay.
before the old show, but I was talking. Well, maybe we'll do. I guess when they release the 400th try of the Terminator franchise to make a good third movie, they say it's coming. Should it?
They've
That's
threatened us, yes.
they threaten us with it. That's a question I'm going to ask you again later about Romulus and going forward. But I think that you're right, Josh. This movie has to just be it's because if it's trying to honestly continue the thread so quickly after Aliens and trying to just mimic what Scott did as this sort of, survivalist haunted house, horror movie. I think that that would be a terrible idea. Now there is
Yeah.
horror elements in this, but it is an action film through and through, and it's one of Cameron's best. It is a highly entertaining, enthralling film. The first 10 minutes of this movie are actually just as scary as anything in the last sections of this movie, where she's in and out of the dreams, and it's very Cameron, and very Cameron-esque, and yet it still has all that stuff with Paul Reiser and all the seediness of the Whaling Corporation and everything is involved in here. And I think Michael Biehn as Hicks is incredible in this movie.
I mean, Michael Biehn just, first of all, just during this time period, like, my God.
Yes. But his chemistry with Weaver in this movie, who's Sigourney, thank God. I mean, this is the other thing too. Academy having the balls and the right mindset to nominate this performance,
Yeah.
and understand like something that they didn't do with like a Furiosa with Charlize Theron, which is this is a great performance, and not many people could do this, and we should celebrate this while we get the chance because it's going to be very fucking hard to repeat this down the road because it's engaging, it's emotionally impactful, and I mean she is fucking badass in this movie. There's no question about that.
Yep. She carries the action and she carries the emotion so well. Like the scenes between her and Newt are really effective. Yeah, it's an incredible performance, and I'm so glad got nominated. But it's also one performance of many that are uh that shine so bright in this film. And like Alien, I think the other key to the success is that you have a group of characters here that you are invested in. And they definitely like have a big group of soldiers that they slowly, cull down to a certain core. But once you get to that point, like, yeah, I'm invested in Hicks. I'm invested in Hudson, by Bill Paxton
Yeah,
and
Bishop.
Vasquez, I'm
Yeah.
at Bishop. Like, I am so invested in those characters that, like, yes, I don't know the names of all those soldiers, but once we get down to a core group, I think those are rich, rich roles to play. And I think that's one of the reasons why this movie also succeeds, because we have a great care of all these other people in the story.
Yeah, for sure. And then, which by the way, also too, one of the great third acts ever.
Oh, amazing.
Just incredible third act, beat for beat, moment to moment, with the flamethrower and her burning down the eggs, that whole set piece,
I
Josh,
love I love the
is
look that she gives when the egg first opens up and she just looks at the queen's like, okay, come on. You know
come
that I
on,
got to
like,
do this now. Yeah.
yeah, I gotta kill this thing, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's so cool. It's one of the great action films ever made.
Yeah.
Period.
But then also the power loader scene too after
Oh
that.
yeah. I mean, still every time I watch this movie, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, I know she survives. I know everything's gonna be okay. But like, my God, it's so tense. And that's I think where the horror is replaced by just tense, uh tense choreographed action sequences that are
And
just done so
amazingly
specific.
edited. Yeah.
Yes. Amazing edited,
Because they go
perfectly
back and forth.
scored.
Yeah, they
You
go
know what I
back and
mean?
forth between animatronics and puppeteering and models. And I've watched that movie so many times, and you could barely tell when they flip back and forth between those different elements. It is seamlessly cut together, and it's one of the greatest edited action sequences of all time.
So we go from two to then this is when I think we're gonna
Yeah.
start having some problems.
Yeah.
We go to Alien 3 or Alien Cubed, however you want to
Mhm.
call it, right? Is that right? That's where the
Yeah,
three's at. It's
the three
cubed,
is
right?
technically like a cube thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very weird.
It's dumb. Let's just say it. Let's just say it, Josh. It's dumb. It's a dumb title thing to do. Anyway, this is David Fincher. Unfortunately, David Fincher, I guess you would say, because Fincher has essentially disowned this movie.
Yeah.
It
His
is
first
the
film, it was his directorial debut.
it is the for many people, it is the, and including Fincher, I guess you would say, it is the how would I describe this? It is the film that holds a perfect resume, right? Because a lot of people think that you take Alien 3 out, Fincher's never made a bad movie. If Fincher would probably be able to take it out, he would have a run of films for the most part by many people, maybe including myself, that would rank up there as a perfect filmography. Um, I think that there's actually a film worse in his filmography than Alien 3. But I still need to go back and rewatch it because I hadn't seen it in a long, long time. And that's The Game. Not a big fan of The Game.
Mm.
Um, I
I
just
think
think
the
it's
game was like fun but disposable.
I think if you watch The Game after you watch, like, I watched them in a row. I watched them, during the pandemic. We did a Fincher series over at the old show with me and Jay. And if you watch them in order, coming off of Seven is not a good way to watch The Game, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
you're then making a movie that is this thriller set around a twist. It's kind of dark. It's got these veteran actors from the 80s in it, you know what I mean, taking center stage. And a young guy for the 90s, 80s and 90s kind of, coming in there alongside him. Like, you can feel, what I'm trying to say? Like, it
Yeah.
feels off a similar sort of premise and
A little bit
a
of a retread.
little bit of a retread. And Seven's a masterpiece. So it's like, it's kind of hard to like compare them, at least for me. But Fincher hates this movie. There's multiple cuts of this thing. I've only seen just the regular cut of it. And I've known it mostly by its reputation of being one of the worst movies of all time. I don't think it's that. Actually, I don't think it's a terrible movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's fine. What I love about it is the way it gets into atmosphere and mood and tone. It's much more similar to the first one, obviously, and it kind of it also retcons fucking everything from Aliens in
Yeah.
like the first 10 minutes of that movie and gets rid of it to kind of go
Yeah. Remember what you
backwards.
loved about Alien so much? That's
It's fucking
gone.
gone. Like, it literally, essentially, like, he kills Newt and everybody. It's like everyone's dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why people have a hard time connecting with it because yeah, right off the bat it establishes itself as very cynical, very dark. And I think that there is some value to that for sure, but every time I watch that movie, I just feel like I'm watching an unfinished film, which essentially I am because if
Yeah.
you know anything about the production history of it, it was very rushed. They had a release date before they had a finished script. Fincher was constantly fighting the studio about script changes and, difficulties with getting actors and just filming. So it just felt like they released something that's like, okay, well, this is what we got. And I think that movie does have some things in it that are like interesting. As you said, the atmosphere that they create in that, the tone, I do like. But as a character piece, which even the other two movies, yes, they're genre exercises, but as we've established, you still care about the people involved. This is when you start to feel like I'm not interested in anybody, and Weaver's great. She'll always be good in that role, but all of these people that are surrounding her, they're just a sea of bald white British dudes for the most part, and they're very interchangeable. The one emotional connection she makes is with Charles Dance, and he don't last very long in this movie. And like Charles S. Dutton is good, but I find that character to be like very one note, and I think he
Yeah.
does the most he can with it. But I don't find anything on the page to be very interesting. And yeah, it's just unfortunate because I think that movie has obviously some very interesting ideas, but I personally do not find that it coalesces all that well. And to be honest with you, if this was not a David Fincher movie, I genuinely wonder what its reputation would be like.
Mm.
If this was not the first film from a director that people really like, that
Or
he
like
he
Joe
himself,
Schmo. Yeah.
yeah, that even Fincher himself has said is not good. I do wonder what its reputation would be today because I personally don't feel like it's that warranted. I find it to still not be a great movie overall.
I don't think it's great, Josh. I just
There
think
are people
it's
out there that do think it's great.
I'm like one, it's not even it's still in his bottom tier. Like it
Yeah.
is probably I'm being unfair to the game. This is probably his worst movie. You know what I mean? Which
It's the
whatever.
one that doesn't have like really real authorship to him is the
It doesn't
problem. At
feel
least not
like
the
him.
pure
Yeah.
authorship.
Like when you watch Seven, even when you watch the game, and from then on outwards, you're like, oh, I know what a David Fincher movie looks like, feels like, is expressed. And yeah, I mean, you can feel the frustrations of a guy who is like, hey, well, Ridley and James got to play in this world. They had pretty much similar resumes than I did. You know what I mean? To a lesser extent, he hadn't done a movie, but he was very successful in music videos, and
Yeah.
he had a reputation of being this like this is the next guy, and that's kind of been like the great thing up to this point about the Alien franchise. It's been a good place to then elevate and potentially give us the next guy or the next director, right? For them to play in this world and give us something specific. And I like the world that he kind of builds, and it's still different and claustrophobic, and there are some good action sequences in it. I think the ending choice of the film, obviously, to for like her to sacrifice herself and everything there, like I think it kind of closes the whole door on this storyline, right? And it doesn't mean,
Theoretically.
yeah, theoretically, but it doesn't mean that we have to keep going with it. And that's the problem. Is like it feels like then this franchise from this point has to continue to go with it. I'm okay with him if he wants to, I feel like even still he holds a grudge to this thing. Like I was picking up when I was watching the first time I ever watched Mank. Um, I could even feel the sort of angerness towards the studio and the system that he's been trying to avoid, but also been
Yeah.
working with throughout his entire career. And he's a perfectionist. I mean, Fincher is a genius. It's the problems of working with a genius like that. It's like, they know that they have to bend, even though they don't want to, and their whole point ends from I think this point on in his and it's great the existence of this because from this point on, it's fueled him to prove everyone wrong. Whether that's
Yeah.
good or bad, is up to him. Um,
I definitely recommend people, if they can, to watch the making of documentary
yeah,
on Alien 3. I think it is absolutely one of the best making of documentaries I've ever seen. And the fact also because I first saw it on the Alien Quadrilogy DVD
yeah,
set back in the day. That was like a holy text for me, honestly. I watched those special features so much. And the one they made for Alien 3, does not hold anything back. Like they talk about the production problems. They have producers up there freely admitting that, yeah, we had a release date before we had a script, and this is what had all of these issues. And they even talk about the first idea that they had because they had a different director attached to it. And that sounded like a really fascinating idea with these like monks on a wooden planet, and Ripley coming there was going to be this, like they thought it was the devil happening in there and thought that she was a demon. That they like, it sounded like a really interesting idea that got watered down, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
I would very much recommend it. People can seek that one out to see it because it is one of the most revealing featurettes I've ever seen, and the fact that it was studio produced too is quite amazing.
So then we go from 3 to Resurrection.
That we do.
Alien Resurrection, 97. 5 years since Alien 3. Scorny's back. She's a clone.
Yep.
They cloned her because of her DNA. And it's got Winona Ryder and Ron Perlman. It's written by Joss Whedon. It's who's the director for this? It's
Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
yes, that's right. Everyone's favorite director. And
Well, he's made good movies.
oh, he's
Amelie.
yeah. Um, is Amelie good?
I think it's good.
I feel like everyone has like it. That movie is so polarizing. It feels like so many people love it, and then some people are like really, you know, it's Amelie. You know what I mean? It's like they're kind of,
Well, it's a very like sophomore year of film school like kind of love. I will
yeah.
admit that, but I think it's still very well done. Yeah.
Okay. I got to rewatch it. It's been years, and I don't remember a thing about it. That's the problem with it. So
I mean, I don't think like it's an amazing movie to me, and I think
no,
Genet, he's one.
it sounds like it's your favorite movie of all time, Josh.
Well,
And
I'm just saying that Genet is a filmmaker who has a very particular like sensibility to him. And I do find that getting him to make an alien film is just so weird. It's very, very strange. And I get why people hate this movie because I think from a story perspective, like the fact that you just cloned Ripley and now that's what you're doing for the basis of this is like I get it why people don't like it.
he went from this to Amelie, which is crazy. Usually it's the
Yeah,
other way around. Usually it's the
exactly.
other way around, actually. So that's kind
But
of
I
cool.
think that he provides some really interesting like visuals to this movie. I think this is the goriest alien film we had gotten up until this point, and I think that if you like gory horror films, there's a lot to enjoy with this one. I think this movie deserves a better reputation. I know this gets ranked last with everybody, but I remember watching it recently and having just a ton of fun with it. And I think that this one recognizes that it's kind of junk. It's not trying to say anything with any kind of like real thematic value to it. It's just meant to be a junky sci-fi horror film. But I think in doing so, it puts up some really fascinating set pieces. I actually like Sigourney Weaver's performance in it. I think she's doing something very different than what she's done in the previous Alien films. And you get to the end with that big alien human, crossbreed creature that's like terrifying but sad at the same time. It's weird. It's a weird swing to go, but I respect the ambition of that movie. And I think that in trying to, it is not like any other alien film that came before it. And I like that about it. And I like it as nothing that is ever approaching the first two movies in terms of their storytelling, but just as like a basic, I'm having fun with trash cinema. That's what I really enjoy about Alien Resurrection.
This movie's terrible. Uh, it's one of the more baffling films in a franchise ever.
I'll agree with you that it's baffling. Yes.
There are choices that are made
Yeah.
throughout it that I when I was I've seen this a couple of times. They're seared in your memory when you watch it. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't disagree, but I feel like
But they're
I'm
also
saying
like
like, parentheses, complimentary for
but
me.
they're also like they're also just so stupid. They're fun. Like you're right, Josh. Like I mean, like this is like a 1.5, 2-star movie, but it's a strong probably 2. Like in the sense of like, I'm not gonna hate if like this was on, right? If I'm watching the marathon, right? I'm not skipping it because
Yeah.
I have fun with it. It's stupid, it's trashy, but again, late '90s, a lot of horror movies were like this, like the Freddy, and we're gonna get to Alien versus Predator here next, and those movies, and we don't really have to talk about those too much because they really don't fit into the core of
Yeah.
everything here, but they kind of feel like in the same vein as this, right? We were in that world where like, yeah, there were some great original horror movies for sure, but the studios were making crap, like, and we're making
Yeah.
schlock, and we're,
And that's
you
what it
know,
is. Like this is a very schlocky movie.
yeah.
But
And there's nothing wrong with some
I have an
schlock every
affinity
now
for
and then.
schlock. I do.
Yeah.
I really love schlocky films. And I especially love them if they can purposefully steer into that tone. And that's what I find with this movie. Like, I'm not going to defend the screenplay. Like, yeah,
No, it's
it's not a
terrible.
very well written
Yeah.
movie. But I think that it also understands that it has a foundation of a story that's not great, but to build up from that, you just got to be fun and have some good set pieces. And I just find that the effects work in this movie is still really good. I mean, there's a moment where the chestburster alien punches through another guy's head.
Yeah, it's
Like,
pretty
and
good.
it's so gnarly and disgusting, and I fucking love it.
It is a movie. It's the first one of this whole series that feels like a fan of the original movies wrote a movie. And Whedon, who's a very nerdy masturbatory
Yeah.
writer in the first place when he gets into his craft, is doing that. And it feels like a kitchen sink of ideas that are getting thrown out there left and right to try to kind of save a franchise that, you know, needed it after the debacle of the film before. And half of them work, and the other half of them are so dumb and so bad that it doesn't make it a great movie, but it makes it a so bad it's fun. I'll watch it. Give me a cocktail. I'll watch it with a crowd. It's like, how did this get made kind of thing? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
You
It's
know
just a
what's
good,
something I just thought of actually right now is that these first four Alien movies actually kind of remind me of the Batman movies.
oh, like the Schumacher
Like the Schumacher and Burton
Burton movies.
films,
Yeah.
where there's kind of this consensus like those first two movies are unimpeachable, they're great, and maybe you flip back and forth between two and one, but most people have those at the top. And then
Yeah.
three and four are either like the misunderstood one that you really like, or it is like the so bad it's good one. It's the one that's very cheesy, but you kind of
Fair.
like those elements to it. And I, like I said,
Ice
just
to
thought
see
about it that
you. Yeah.
they kind of fit within that framework of those first four Batman movies is
Yeah.
what I sort of feel like people's reception to these first four Alien movies. And I think Resurrection, yeah, is definitely one where
It's definitely the
even,
Batman and Robin of this whole series. I'll tell you that.
but I don't think that's a bad thing
But
for
that's not
some
a bad thing.
people,
No,
you
those are
know, like because
there
it's
was something
fun.
there was something about movies in the 90s, the blockbusters that missed, right? That I think everybody out there knows. Josh and I just have a soft spot for.
Yeah.
Like Josh and I are defenders of a movie like Wild Wild West, or a movie like this, a movie like Batman and Robin, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Lost in Space, which is an abominable movie, but like it's still like,
I
hey,
will watch it. Yeah.
I'll watch that movie if you put it on. Let's go. You know what I mean? Um, there's tons of them that you can go through, and they're much. And for some reason, maybe they're just shot better. Maybe there's just like the seed of hope that maybe it gets better with time. But they're much more interesting kind of commodities than movies now that look terrible. Like I'll tell you this, Josh, you put this movie on, I'll watch it. But if you put on Harold and the Purple Crayon, I'm walking out of that room. I'm going home. Like, just that's just a
Yeah.
fact. Put on
There.
put on Men in Black 2. Yeah, I'll give it a go. Put
Yeah.
on Men in Black International, I'm gone. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely makes sense because these are still filmmakers that have a point of view to them. Like,
Yeah.
even if the foundation they're working with, the material that they are given is not great, they are able to still fashion something in the filmmaking and in the set pieces that gets you invested. And that's what I feel about with Alien Resurrection. And I do very much feel like it deserves a better reputation. I'm not ever going to argue that it's a great movie. It is not like one of the best of the series. I'm never going to say that it comes close to the first two, but I do find a lot of value in this film that is not trying to be high art at all. It's just trying to be kind of like junk sci-fi, but in a very fun way. And I get a kick out of that. I think that there are set pieces in this movie and scenes that I will remember forever but because of their creativity. And I think that that is very, very valuable.
For sure. For sure. All right. I'm just gonna skip over Alien versus Predator. That's all right.
Well, I will
Real
just say
quick, if you want to do a real quick thing on both of them.
very quickly, because I did actually rewatch Alien versus Predator recently, and like that movie actually is kind of fun. What holds it back is that it's not rated R. That's my big problem with it.
Yeah.
If it had been a little bit more gung ho,
isn't the sequel? The sequel is, right?
the sequel is rated R.
But that
Yes.
movie's bad.
Yeah, that one is like unwatchable.
That is the
And when I say
worst of the
unwatchable-
Alien movies of all. Like it's
Yeah, and when I say that the second AVP movie is unwatchable, I don't just mean like quality wise. I mean literally. Like that movie is so dark, you literally cannot see anything.
Yeah.
So like that's what I mean by unwatchable. You actually cannot see what is happening in that movie. The daytime sequences, you feel like you need to turn up the brightness on your television.
It's very last season of Game of Thrones.
Yes, that movie is terrible. But the first one, like it's a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, so obviously you know what you're kind of getting with it.
Honestly, kind of want to do a series on him. You know what I mean?
If you do, invite me for Event Horizon because I can talk about that movie.
I kind of want to do a series on him because he's like before he went like full. Doesn't he go like full Resident Evil movies though? Like
because his wife is in those films
because she's married to Mila Jovovich.
Yeah. And
I mean, we've done PTA. We might as well do the other.
Might as well. Like I said, I would talk about Event Horizon. I love that movie.
There's something about a trash director series.
He's totally trash auteur. Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yeah.
And that's what AVP is. Like that first movie, it's not great. It's very like mid 2000s blockbuster cinema.
Technically, it's the first one.
Yeah.
If you go by the timeline, it's technically the first one in all of this.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Kind of insane.
Not a great movie. Very disposable. But like,
again,
if you were flipping around on TNT and it had started 20 minutes ago, like, I'd watch it. That's what it is. Like it's a TNT movie.
Yeah, it's a Sci-Fi Channel movie.
I mean, they're kind of interchangeable sometimes.
They're kind of. Well, TNT, they'll put on a good movie every now and then. Sci-Fi, mostly going to be like
the moniker of TNT movie is the film that you watch on like a Sunday afternoon. You ain't got much going on. Maybe you're cooking something in the kitchen.
You don't mind the commercials.
Yeah, you're just flipping channels. It's like, oh, Alien versus Predator. It started 20 minutes ago. Yeah, I could watch it like half.
I got a lasagna in the oven.
Yeah.
I got 50 minutes until this thing's ready. An hour.
Like that's a TNT movie. That's what I mean by that.
And you don't have to, I mean, you can finish it if you want, but like,
but it doesn't matter.
No one's putting a gun to your head.
You're not watching from the beginning anyway. Like it started 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, and it's going to end in like 6 hours. But like, and
you're like half paying attention. You're on your phone too, looking at Twitter or something.
Yeah, you got like some like The Librarian or whatever that thing is that Noah Wiley does coming on afterwards or whatever.
Yeah, see, nobody like our age has cable anymore, so this
nobody knows. Again, we're the only ones that can get these references. This is a perfect conversation, Josh.
But a TNT movie, like sometimes those are good too.
See, kids, there used to be this thing that you called cable, and you had to buy it. And I still have cable because that's because it doesn't make any sense not to just have it because it's just as expensive as buying all the streaming apps nowadays. So they're gonna basically those companies, they're gonna get your money somehow. All right. Okay, so they have all this time in between things, right? And then 2012 rolls along. And the Riddler comes back and says, I would like to make a prequel to my original film. And he gives us Prometheus. Now, Josh, before you go into Prometheus, I just gotta say, the marketing for Prometheus is some of the greatest marketing I've ever seen for a movie.
That teaser was
It
amazing.
is one of the most amazing teaser trailers of all time. I still go back to it. I went back to it literally before this podcast,
Yep, same.
and it was incredible. I was like, why don't I feel the rush for this that I feel for mostly most of the films that come
Yeah.
out nowadays? And I know it's to really tap into my nostalgia and really try to get me back into a good place, and build up the terror.
Well, they literally use the same like sound effects from that first
Sound
Alien
effects,
trailer.
musical, I mean, music
Yeah.
cues, all that stuff. It's great. It's got Darius Wolski doing cinematography. It's got Amy Rapace. It's got Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, Idris Elba, uh, Logan Marshall Green, Charlize Theron. It is a stacked cast. What do you think? I actually don't know Josh's take on the prequels. Prequels are also like, that's the other thing too about Alien that we didn't mention. Kind of a big influence from for Alien for Ridley Scott was Star Wars. He loves Star
Oh yeah,
Wars. He
absolutely.
literally just said in his letterbox four favorite red carpet thing that Star Wars is one of his four favorite movies. Big reason why he took the Alien job is because of it. But there's also, it's funny how we're talking about this franchise,
Yeah.
and we're talking about this because you can honestly fucking put these movies in their own categories from what the Star Wars movies are. And of course, the original creator coming back after like 30 years to the original franchise, making prequels, and being very precious about it, and then having mixed reactions. So Josh, I got to know, what do you think of Prometheus?
Well, before Prometheus even officially came out, I was very nervous about it. Because as I said previously, one of the things I love about Alien is not having answers to a lot of the mysteries of that movie. So knowing that Prometheus was going to dive into that, I was like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want to know this information because it will make Alien a lesser film to have that knowledge. So I was very trepidatious heading into it. And I think Prometheus as a movie is one that I still enjoy, but I always feel like my big issue with it is it feels caught between wanting to be its own science fiction original story and wanting to be an Alien prequel. And every time I watch it, I just feel like there are things that happen in that story that feels like it's caught in this weird in-between arena where it wants to sort of do its own thing, but it also needs to tell the story of how the alien creature came into existence. And I don't think it handles that balance very well. It is entertaining. I do like that movie. I still find myself enjoying it for the most part, but I find that the story itself just can't commit to what it exactly wants to do. And I find that to be very frustrating. So I get to the end, and it's like I had a good time with it, but it also feels like whatever we were building up to just feels so muddled to me that I don't really get much out of it from a narrative perspective at that point.
Kind of like Prometheus. Um, I think it's really effective in kind of in just its basic setup. It's not as scary or as terrifying, and it's not obviously nearly as focused on the alien aspect of things because he wasn't really interested in any of that shit. He's more interested in the engineers. He's more interested in the mythology, sort of like expanding the idea of what the company really does want and their sort of sinister plans, and how Wayland is really wanting this to be like some sort of, it's like what if Elon Musk got his fucking dream to go all the way out there to search for the fountain of
Yeah.
youth. You know what I mean? And and yet what is fascinating, what is great is his scares feel still very authentic. The sort of cutting the Numi Rapace cutting the alien out of her own body scene is
Great.
incredible stuff.
Yeah.
I think Fassbender's performance in this movie, his performances in these two movies, honestly,
Yeah.
are some of his best work, period. They're truly great stuff. He understood the assignment completely. I do think that because it's such a large ensemble, there are wasted people and wasted performances. Like Idris
Yeah.
Elba, Charlize Theron is pretty one note.
Idris
Uh,
Elba, like
what
what is he doing in this
what is he
movie?
doing? He's just like steering a ship at this point.
Why is he Southern? That's the other thing. Like,
Yeah.
why does he have a Southern accent? I
I
don't
mean,
understand.
Charlize Theron is super one note, just giving
Yeah.
angry. I don't want to be here.
Why is Guy Pearce an old man in
Well, he's
terrible
wailing.
makeup?
Yeah,
Like,
I
why
mean,
did you
like
just cast like Christopher Plummer?
he's
Like old
he's
people existed.
he's like literally the third act twist is that he's actually still alive.
Yeah.
And
Well, the issue is that they had filmed a dream sequence where he was going to be younger, and that's
Mhm.
the reason why you cast Guy Pearce. But when you don't have that scene anymore, like now you
no,
just
they
have Guy Pearce in old age makeup for like no reason.
no, they have him in old mage makeup in like a hologram at the beginning of the film, right? And then like because he's like introducing the mission to everyone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then you find out he's in one of the cryo sleeps, and you're like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, you know what I mean? But honestly, it
yeah.
does speak to the fact that like these billionaires will not die until they get the power or the
Oh yeah,
the
like that's the
entity that they
one
want.
thing
Yeah,
that can't stop them. And like
yeah,
there are really
it's a
fascinating
fascinating idea.
concepts in that movie. Like and it really gets at another side of science fiction, like the kind of philosophical commentary that I really appreciate out of sci-fi. I just don't know if that really belongs in an Alien prequel. You know,
I don't
like
think that there's
that's where I
enough
butt up
there.
against it.
Yeah, I don't think that there's enough there, and I think Spates and Lindelof, who are honestly these sacrificial lambs. They really
Yeah.
are. I mean, I feel bad. I know Damon Lindelof is a damn good writer. So like let's not say that he isn't. But he's been sandwiched within two films that really aren't his fault. They're at the fault of I think the creative geniuses behind the camera and in Brad Bird and Ridley Scott, because he also had the problem with Tomorrowland at the same time, Lindelof.
Yeah.
And I think that though I don't hate Tomorrowland either as much as and I don't hate this movie. I just think
No.
that it's not as cohesive. I mean it's better than 3 and Resurrection for me. But that's not saying much. You know what I mean? Because there's still like I go back to this by the end of the exercise, like you're saying. If what is the purpose of all this at the end? Like, what's the purpose of us following Numi Rapace as a character if we're not then going to have anything? And then what drives me up the walls about Covenant is that this story just doesn't fucking matter at that point. And
Yeah.
she's used or kind of disposed in a I remember this, and this is why I hate marketing sometimes too. Her story is thrown away in a kind of pre-film
It was like a
YouTube
prologue, right? Yeah, but it was
prologue.
only online.
Yeah, and it was gonna be in the film, but they cut it. You can hear her like voice in in Covenant. I think Covenant again has really interesting themes, and it has
Yeah.
some very dark shit to explore, especially through David. But as a alien film and as just a film overall, its sum does not equal its parts. And I mean, it does have though what my background is tonight, which is one of the great scenes of the last decade, which is the two Davids playing the flute.
Not a euphemism.
Not a euphemism for some very, very gay stuff.
Put your
And
lips together and blow. Yes.
yeah, I'll, I'll, I'll use the fingers, right?
Yes.
Like
I'll do the fingering.
I'll
Yes.
do the fingering. It's Josh. What were you saying to me before we were doing this, and I put this thing up? You were like, I don't know how they didn't like tell Ridley anything, right?
Yeah, it's like somebody should have said maybe not include that line and really was like, no, it's going in. The
You know what?
fingering line is going in.
I think when you tell him no, he's like one of
Yep.
those kids are like, fuck it, it's going in and I'm gonna loop it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we're cranking up the homoeroticism even more now.
They're gonna like make pottery like Ghost, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, Alien Covenant has a really fascinating idea at the center of it, which I really like, which is the idea of creation. I
Mm-hmm.
love that David is a character who is an android. He was created and he has the self awareness of that, but he also has the self awareness to know that he was created by imperfect beings and that he is superior to the things that actually made him. But he's fascinated by that and he goes on this just odyssey to be a creator himself. Like that's a really interesting idea and I love it as a science fiction concept. Again, where I have my issue with is how that then basically leads to the birth of the xenomorph. And I just don't feel like that is naturally fitting together for me. It feels like a very awkward joining of a fascinating idea, but then again, having to be an Alien prequel. And
Yeah.
once we get to that point, like the ironic thing about this movie is that when it becomes bad is when it becomes an Alien movie. When it's not an Alien film, it's actually really
Really
good.
good.
But
Yeah.
then I'm reminded, like, oh no, that's right. This is an Alien film. And
They've
then
got to
that's when it
survive
just,
through everything. And you're like, God damn it.
yeah,
It's like be one or be the other. And
this
and
is my
that's
problem with both of these movies.
it's like they want to be, yeah, because like he teases at the end of Prometheus, the birth of the xenomorph is through the creator getting engulfed through, right? Because David sort of
Yeah.
puts the goo inside of him or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. Like you're gonna kind of explore that. And the sucky thing is after Covenant is that like it leaves you on a cliffhanger. And you're like, fuck, okay. Well, I mean, like, again, this is a very frustrating process, but I'm kind of enjoying these exercises, even though if they're not like particularly fulfilling, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But now they just sit there. Now they just sit in this universe of this storyline, and thing is never going to get touched. You know what I mean? Until
Yeah.
maybe Noah Hawley next year because we have a
Eh.
prequel television series coming out,
Well,
which scares the
I
shit
think
out of
there
me.
were I think we'll talk about this soon, but I think there were some ideas maybe for a third movie that really slid into Romulus. I have a suspicion about that.
I think that's the perfect time to start talking about Romulus.
Yeah.
Um, Much like what we did with Trap, it's released after the opening weekend, so we can talk spoilers. So spoilers going forward for Alien Romulus. If you haven't seen it, stop listening. Don't listen to this anymore. You've seen all those other films. I would have hoped so. But Alien Romulus, Fede Álvarez is the director of this movie. Um, it stars Cailee Spaeny, Priscilla herself, and it is a film that is sandwiched in between the timeline of Alien and Aliens, and it's kind of about these space pirates, I guess you could say, ragtag bunch of space
They're
pirates that are
like
trying to get
miners, yeah,
miners,
that
space
like
pirates.
yeah.
Alvarez said space pirates, so I'm gonna go with
Well, I guess they
space
are like
pirates.
going onto that ship and stealing stuff.
Yeah,
So like that's what makes them
yeah.
pirate like, yeah.
None of them say "r," which is kind of like
No.
disrespectful. But they're trying to steal the sleeping pods because they want to use the sleeping pods, have Spain's droid slash brother navigate the ship for them while they sleep and go off to another system away from their humdrum situation. Right? Is that kind of like what it is essentially? Right? Like they want to
Yeah,
float
yeah.
away, and
That's
then
basically it.
they, of course, they get to this place. It's an abandoned station. Aliens and face crawlers and all that stuff that starts to happen. Josh, Romulus.
Hmm.
First of all, what do you think of Fede Alvarez as a director? What do you think that did you like his previous other films like Don't Breathe and the Evil Dead remake and then what did you think of Romulus?
I think that overall, he's a decent filmmaker. I liked Don't Breathe. Don't Breathe is a movie where it's like for the most part, I thought it was like really good until they basically had to make the blind guy an actual villain. Like I think that movie is actually really good when it's the perspective of you're following these kids breaking into this guy's house and he's getting revenge and like your loyalties are tested there. And when it
When
Like
they made the sequel after
yeah,
he became a bad guy, and then they made a sequel and they make him the good guy and they try to go all Terminator 2 on it.
yeah,
It felt really weird because they like essentially made him to be a vile human being by the end of that movie. The first one,
yeah,
right? And then
yeah.
they're like, and then they like turn around and try to justify it. It's a really weird relic of filming. And those movies made decent money too, if I'm
Yeah,
not
they
mistaken.
did. But I liked Don't Breathe. I think that movie actually has like brilliant sound design.
Yeah.
Like I loved that particular element
The
of
kind of
it.
low
And
rent horror that you want to see, I think.
yeah, I mean nothing like ambitious or anything, but
Mhm.
like a really solid genre exercise. And I would say the same thing about his Evil Dead remake. Not as good as the first movies, obviously, but enjoyable for what they were. And I think that he does tone and atmosphere really well. And you definitely get that sense in Alien Romulus. And I like that there is a return to the kind of stripped down version that we got in the first film. But ultimately, like if I were ranking all of these movies, this is actually the film I would put in dead last in terms of
Really?
the Alien films.
All of
Yeah.
them.
Out of all
All
of
of them.
them, I would
Okay.
rank this last. And to me, it is the one movie in this series that kind of doesn't have anything new to add. There is no distinction within its story, certainly not within its characters, because these characters are all like outside of Cailee Spaeny and David Jonsson, they're like nobody cares anything about these other people. And it just felt to me like there's no real weight to any of the sequences too and their set pieces. The feeling I kept having as I was watching this film is that it felt like a video game to me, where we get a moment that's like you have your cutscene exposition, there's a little bit of action that's happening, and then when it's done, like your characters are mostly fine. And then we just shuffle on to the next level. And then we even have like a weapons tutorial moment in the movie. It kind of just felt so lightweight to me. I didn't feel any real connection to this story in a significant way. And at the end of the day, like I kind of enjoyed it. I had a decent time with it. I was mildly entertained, but it was the one Alien film that I felt like did not have anything of distinction to it that I could look at and be like, okay, there's all these other problems, but at least there's this. At least there's this one great concept or a collection of scenes that I find to be really engaging. This movie didn't really have any of that. It was very surface level and glossy, and I did not find myself thinking that it was novel in any way, and that was very underwhelming.
Okay, Josh. I completely agree with you.
Hmm.
I'm going to take it a step further. This is one of the most disappointing movies of the year. It's one of the worst movies of the year. And it's an alarming trend that is continuing. And I saw this a lot of people online starting to talk about like, well, if you don't like a movie like this, like you didn't like movies in the first place, or you're putting way too much stock into these things. We just talked about a bunch of movies in this franchise that have perspectives, interesting ideas, auteur directors, fantastic performances. And the other thing that most of those movies had were characters that didn't feel like they were completely stupid, moronic, couldn't learn from their mistakes.
Well,
They were
they do to a point. I mean, that's usually one of the big criticisms of like the prequel movies.
no, well, like the point being is like if an action happened to Ripley 15 minutes before, guess what? She probably wouldn't have done it again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because she didn't, you know, or she'd find an ingenious way to get out of this situation. And there's also what you talked about earlier, the believability factor of the group as a whole already together. This group that is in this movie is actually the most together group that we've ever seen outside since Aliens with the
Yeah.
military group, right? Like this turns of like they've been with each other the most, and we should feel that. And it's not very good when I'm rooting in an aliens movie for the aliens to kill all the humans. That's not a good thing. It's not. Because the
Not with this
alien,
kind of a movie. No.
no, you're supposed to root for them to survive. They are survival movies. When you start rooting for Michael Myers, you've got a problem. You know what I mean? When you start rooting
Well,
for
you've got
Fred,
schlock at that point.
yeah,
And like there's fun to be had in schlock, but you got to steer into that tone that I don't think
you
this
gotta
movie
have
does
like
that
a
at all.
you gotta wink a little bit more than just
Exactly.
throwing in a cup or throwing in a shot or a glance at the pass. And that's the problem, is that this is a movie entirely built again by fans. Álvarez and his screenwriters are fans of this franchise. It's one of their favorite movies of all time, is Alien and Aliens, right? They grew up watching this thing over and over again, and they can't help themselves from giving us nostalgia slop,
Yeah.
that's just slop, not slop, slop,
Yeah.
that just absolutely is uninspired. It's messy. It's honestly, for Álvarez and his style of directing, which is he is a director that is known for the sort of audacity within his violence and his shock and horror, and being able to sort of push the envelope for it. Like that is, I think, the thing that sets his Evil Dead movie apart from Raimi's films, is its sure unabashedness and wickedness that is at the center of this. That is, I think, the appeal of a movie like Don't Breathe, is how vile that movie becomes and turns into. And I think it's a commentary on the vile nature of all those characters involved. And it's interesting. I don't think it fully works, but it's an interesting turn. None of that is in here. There's no actual twist and turnness that feels organic. It feels as if we have seen every single story beat, line for line, character beat for character beat, reveal after reveal, to be the same that we've seen before. And you're right, Josh. It feels like he has Ridley Scott's hands all fucking over this movie.
Well,
And
especially the finale.
it
Like
does. Like the finale feels like the prequels. It feels like also a mixture of aliens. It turns more into an action movie than it is a horror movie. This is actually, I think that it leans by the start of the movie, it's trying to be Alien, but by the end of the movie, it wants to be Aliens, if that makes
well, it
sense.
has like
And it's
references and callbacks to like all of the Alien movies, honestly, because like it feels like yes, it wants to have that action tone in it, but like the creature that we see at the end of this movie, that looks like the creature at the end of Alien Resurrection.
well, that's also, it looks like but it also looks like the creators in the
Exactly.
prequels.
It's sort of a mixture of those, and
It's
like yeah,
just like
them going
shit.
back to the Prometheus. Like as soon as I saw them do that, it's like really thought we were done with this shit.
I thought we were done with this guy. Like, you know what I mean? Also, but that's like the problem too. So your pregnant friend has just been taken by the xenomorph, right? And yet your friend before in the movies, this is where logic and your
Well,
characters being really stupid doesn't help. And the movie dumbs it down to humans are stupid and androids can only do, because they have emotions. There's no in-betweenness or logical thinking that they can ever do, is what the movie presents itself. And that any droid in this movie or clone in this movie or whatever, they're the only ones that know what to do, because their primary mission is the mission. And it's cold, but it's effective. And it's like, no, because I've seen characters in this universe before make harsh decisions, and it's not all just based in emotion. And if it was based in emotion, there's a purpose to it, and everything. And still, to not understand that, like, you went after this one girl who now literally has probably been morphed by the xenomorph itself, after your friend before got chest bursted, and you're not thinking about any of that. You're not thinking about any of the fact that she might have been contaminated just like your other friends that are already dead? No, we couldn't think about that at all because that would make sense. And the movie doesn't breathe enough for these characters because it's on a clock, right? Like, and that's the video game-ness of it. It's on a clock for 90 minutes to get in and out of the station. And so from the moment you're there, you're literally on the clock, and it doesn't let it breathe. And it's a bad movie. Yeah.
I mean, I did, like, as I said, I had marginal fun with it. It's one of those things where in the moment I was entertained. I would say like the bare minimum amount for me, but I just could not get over this feeling of like, it's not even scary, really.
No.
It's not a very scary movie. And the action is like decent. I think there are some fine set pieces that they have in there, but none of them are amazing in my opinion. And it does get weighted down by a lot of those like very cringy callbacks, and resurrecting Ian Holm was just
We
a
got to talk
terrible
about that.
decision. Like
We got to talk about that.
I don't understand it really, because I mean, well, I understand it just for the nostalgia bait. That's why. But if that was a completely different character who did the exact same thing, would have been perfectly fine. Like if he was just another android who still just had company orders to protect the xenomorph and do it by any means necessary, like that would have been just as good. We did not need to see Ash reincarnated just because he was the android from the first movie.
What if it was Fassbender? Would that have been better?
It would have been a little better, but I still feel like it would have been like another nod to the movies that we just didn't need. Like,
yeah, I guess so.
To me, even though you will always suspect that character will turn bad, I think once you see that it is Ian Holm or it's Michael Fassbender, you're immediately set up to feel like, okay, well, the turn's going to happen.
Yeah, this guy's it's not going to be a friendly version of this.
Yeah, if it's another character, if it's another actor, yeah, you're going to be suspicious that the turn's going to happen anyway, because all of them, you're suspicious about that. But at least it wouldn't be right off the bat. Like the minute you see Ian Holm, it's like, okay, well, we already know he's luring them into a false sense of security to work for the company.
It's also just deeply, I'm sorry, it's just deeply offensive. Man's been dead for 4 years.
And it also doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. Thing. No, it's terrible.
Yeah, CGI the effect work is awful.
And that's the problem. It's like this movie wants to live in the world where it's like CGI is everything, but we got all these practical effects and the xenomorphs are real. And it's like, yeah, but you then have some of the worst de-aging, deep face AI looking crap. It looked
like a deep fake to me, because like the mouth especially was like
the eyes. Right. It was the eyes. They all looked dead. It looked dead inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just it was a bad decision. And that character is driving a lot of the plot in this movie forward for them too. Yeah. And that's a really just poor decision. And for really, if you're trying to separate yourself and not be just a fan service movie, which I think that this is, take this guy out of it, because otherwise you're just trying to be what Rogue One is. You're trying to be, that's what this movie really kind of felt like. Like the Spaeny character was giving me the blandness of Felicity Jones as an actress for me, an actress I'm not a big fan of. And I found out she's going to be in Brady Corbett's The Brutalist, Felicity Jones, and that kind of bummed me out. But like Spaeny, I know is a good actress.
Yeah, and it's the material that she's given.
The material is terrible, and she might also be a little miscast here too. Like I don't know. I was thinking about other actresses. I was thinking about other actors. It also feels like, I don't know, we've gone to the point where like there's so many. I mean, like those films did have really great character actors, or really great, or at least a lead name that we knew. It felt like marginal Alien. Like the stakes of it and everything, it felt like you were saying, Josh, it just felt like there was no sense of urgency to any of this, and all these like, BBC Three, Gen Z character actors I could give a shit about,
who I could not understand. I'm sorry, I'm sorry to sound like a dumb American, but those accents were
I'm pretty
tough to get through.
I'm pretty good when it comes to hearing that stuff, and even I was just like, my theater doesn't have bad sound here. Like this is just like.
Well, and
You
now I
know,
have heard it from enough people that it is a problem with the movie
it's the
because,
sound mix. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
enough people I have made this complaint to, and they've said the same thing that it is hard to understand what those characters are saying. And the one person in this cast, though, that I will give laurels to is David Jonsson.
He is
I
the
think that he gives a
he's the best thing in the
fantastic
movie.
performance in this movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like. I mean, in the beginning, I think that he is maybe a little too over the
Simple.
top with his like meek mannerisms, but I think when the switch happens and it becomes more like kind of insidious and sinister, that's when it's so much more interesting. And I like that he kind of becomes a villainous presence, but it's not totally like it's not like you could now not trust him with anything. It's just a little bit more doubt in terms of what side he's on. But he's more capable now too in the situation. So it's like you need him, but you're suspicious of him at the same time. And I love the way that he plays those notes in those scenes. And I think David Jonsson is by far the best performance in this movie. And he's legitimately great in this role.
No, he's really good in this movie. And I like, ends up nowadays outside of Ripley being that the androids are the more
Yeah.
interesting characters. Because it's one of those where we finally get to see the sort of tug and pull, and I wish there was more explored about this internal struggle for maybe him having this new protocol put inside of him with these memories, right, of his relationship with Rain. Also just like fucking terrible names. Like for this movie,
Yeah.
like it was hard to understand what names were or here's things. I think the movie is like shot. It's got an orange hue to it, but it's not particularly, it's way too dark at times too. Especially like that final sequence, like the final battle underneath or whatever. It was kind of hard to, I mean, unless you're finding that
Yeah.
literal white xenomorph looking character, it's really hard and to watch at times. And it just, the you have then the other thing, Josh, that kind of really frustrated me about the movie is the goo, the Prometheus goo, as I like to call it, and
Yeah.
Project Prometheus coming back into this, and between that and the engineer looking creature and all these different things. And then like the last time we saw David, he's got like this stuff kind of coming, like he's bringing this shit with him, and it kind of looks exactly like with all the face huggers and where they're kind of locked up and everything. It's almost feels very similar to that. It feels like we did get the Covenant prequel that we wanted. It's just it was not what we asked for here.
No,
And
it definitely felt like there were some ideas that Ridley Scott had that he didn't get to do in his third movie, and they were snuck into here. And
and
I
he gave
feel
him the
like,
blessing. And he gave him the
yeah,
blessing and everything here.
and I just don't like that is the least interesting thing about these alien movies to me. Like I don't feel like they belong in these films, and they're not bad concepts on their own, but they are just so awkwardly fixed to this franchise, and I just don't ever like it. And as I said before, it is in service of providing answers to questions that one, I don't need the answers to, and I think actually getting them makes Alien a worse movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm not invested in anything that takes away from what I actually enjoy about that first film. And returning to the engineers and the life goop, like I rolled my eyes when that came back and it was like, oh my God, why are we going back to this?
The life
No,
goop.
no, that's what it
I
is.
love
It's
it.
the
I
life
love
goop.
it.
Yeah.
I love it, Josh. No, I mean, like, I got a big question for you.
Mm.
Well, I got a couple of big questions, but I'm going to start off with this one. Where the hell do you go after this? Like, if this is a hit, which I think it's going to make like 40-45 this
Yeah,
weekend,
it'll be a decent
which is on an
hit at the
$80
box
million
office.
budget, it should probably be break even, right?
I assume so.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a tiny profit.
Maybe
Yeah.
a tiny, who knows? Where do you go from here? What do you do? Because you're done with the prequels. This story seems to like kind of just end. I don't think that these characters are very likable, nor would I want to see them again. It feels like a kind of an isolated one-off. even though it's trying to also connect into, again, the alien and aliens sort
Yeah,
of
I mean,
story.
I would be fine if what they wanted to do further was to try to just have new characters again, because I mean, I like Cailee Spaeny, but I don't know if Rain is really like our new Ripley. I don't get
She's,
that
yeah.
sense from this one movie. I don't know if I'm invested in seeing her adventures continue or even what they would necessarily be to drag her back into another alien movie that wouldn't just be like aliens again.
Hmm.
So, like, I'd be fine if you just want to make like one-offs and just have different characters in this world. I think there's a way to do that, but you really need to, and maybe finally being gotten rid of the gum on your shoe that is Prometheus and Alien Covenant, maybe finally scraping that off, they can be their
The
own
goop on your
entities.
shoe. Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe that is just what needed to happen with this movie to get to better films in the future. Because yeah, at the end of this film, nothing here made me think, all right, I want to continue this story. That did not instill any kind of confidence in me and all that would be a wise decision.
Josh, do you think that some franchises, no matter how much we love them, should die?
Absolutely.
That should stop.
Many of them have been limping on far longer than they needed to be.
This is one of those, right? I want to talk about some of them that you think should. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to, like, back recesses of your mind, kind of, just pull them off the top of your head. I think Alien and Predator, um, and the Halloween franchise, a lot of the horror franchises.
Yeah, horror definitely
The horror
will
franchises,
fulfill
it
this.
I think it's they gotta stop. You know what I mean? They've got to stop. The same with Indiana Jones. You gotta stop this shit. Just, I think audiences, and as much as I'm gonna hate saying this, even though I love the film from this year, Mad Max, these are things that gotta stop. Because, or I put them on ice for 10, 15 years. Don't come back to it.
Yeah, a break is
Because,
good, but also reinvention is good too. And the
yeah,
problem with so many of these series is that they get to a point when they're not thinking of what you can do to be innovative or to evolve the series. They're just repeating the same thing over and over again, just with diminishing returns. And I think that there is still value in a lot of the other Alien movies that came after the second film, but clearly they've not gotten to the heights of those first two movies. And a
mhm.
large part of that is because they just have a hard time breaking free from that formula, or they don't actually do the good things from those movies. Like they take the wrong lessons of the success, thinking people want big action spectacle and they want the horror stuff. But then it's like, yeah, but we also want like good characters and good filmmaking at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem with modern filmmaking. It's that, and it's the problem with even a movie like Deadpool, Wolverine doing really well. It's it's honestly the movie that I keep thinking about over the summer is Wally. Because I think about when Wally gets on the ship and it's these people with computer screens giving them everything that they want at the click of a button without any consequence whatsoever. And then when the machine finally like fades off and they actually have to stand on their own 2 feet, they actually have to go and explore. They realize that what is left to them is kind of rubble and they have to rebuild it from scratch and find a way to do so. And I feel like this is a lot with audiences. They crave, I think they want new things because they literally are telling us at times, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. With some of these franchises, like we're hoping Alien Romulus makes money. There's no guarantee. Like the Planet of the Apes movie, it barely is going to make a profit. The Fall Guy
Well, these
is
are also
not
franchises that are based off of properties that are like
super
50
old.
years old at this point.
Yeah. But so is James Bond, and those movies make money. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
And that's a
there
franchise
also has
that's
no been not been movement on another movie lately, which
exactly.
is a
And
little
that's honestly
concerning.
to Bond. No, well, honestly, to Bond's credit, it's good Because here's why. It'll be a fresh Bond, start from scratch, time in between the last one. Hopefully it'll be a director that people like or has an interesting vision. Like they have a chance to do something special there. And they're not beholden at this point to anything of the past. For the first time in their life, they can actually do whatever the fuck they want. And they're letting the past die. It's the Ryan Johnson Last Jedi theory. Let the past die so the future of this can go forward. Stop being so beholden.
But I just don't want people to forget about Bond.
No. I don't think people will.
Concern.
I don't think people will. It's too big of a franchise. It's the biggest franchise of all time.
But it's also a franchise that trends to older audiences, and
true.
I think that they are not going to the movies as frequently.
I think No Time to Die and Skyfall and Casino Royale, people love those movies, and I know it's because of Craig, but you got to get them. I agree, you got to get them out there, but at the same time,
we'll have that later.
No, we'll have that. Like you need a movie star though in the seat of that. I think nowadays, or at least a good actor that could do that. There's a bunch of prospects.
Yeah,
that's the thing going forward with these things. What is a movie star? What our blockbuster filmmaking look like? Because obviously we're going to have a crap ton of Marvel movies that are going to come out. We're going to have Mission Impossible. We're going to have Disney IP at the wazoo with sequels and prequels. This is, for all intents and purposes, this is a Disney property. This is what they've made. This is what they want to do going forward. They have a prequel series from Noah Hawley that is coming out literally, I think next year, late next year.
I think it's next year.
Yeah. And I like Noah Hawley a lot. What he's done with Fargo has shown that he can create something new within the universe. And maybe that's where some of this old IP needs to go. Maybe it needs to go, to the television sphere and expand it out that way and make it interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But all I know is that I'm seeing a lot of these movies over and over again do the same thing, where it is creatives behind the camera that are more fans than actual creatives at large. And instead of trying to, like you're saying, I'm sure James Cameron, David Fincher, these guys were fans of the original Alien, but their goal was to, at successful, unsuccessful, whatever the case may be, their goal was to try to move the story along, to try to move this franchise forward, to do things in it that you hadn't done before. Fede Álvarez is a fan, and there's nothing wrong with being a fan, but that then blocks yourself from any objectiveness to be, I'm going to create something new here and unique. And at least you can say that about Ridley's prequels, is that while it doesn't know what it wants to be, it doesn't know if it wants to just be a philosophical debate or an alien movie and gets lost in between there, it at least has a vision and at least is trying to move things forward through someone's, even though it might be meandering for a confident lens. This movie feels like, I don't know if I want to make Alien or Aliens, so I'm going to squeeze them both together in between this movie. I have $80 million to make this movie, but my audience is not smart enough to not have a character that is, the actor's actually dead, so I need to get the CGI to make that character exist. I'm going to hire a bunch of actors, most of them not many audience members know at all. And even Cailee Spaeny, while I love her, most people don't know who she is. And the last people were like Michael Fassbender and, like I said, Charlize Theron and all these, and Idris Elba, and these established actors were in this franchise. That's not the case here. So and then you put it in August. There's no sense of urgency to this thing. Like, where do you, and by the end of it, like we said, Josh, where do we go from here? It feels like Hollywood is hurting themselves. And then they're like, well, why didn't it make any money? And it's like, well, it didn't make any money because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, I get Deadpool Wolverine making money because that tells you everything you need to know about the mind of the creators from the title alone. It tells you this is a Deadpool Wolverine movie. You wanted it. We're giving it to you. We're not hiding it. And we're going to give it and just give us our money. Like that's what it is. And while I think that kind of, storytelling is dangerous and it's a little soulless, it's it's more confident than something like this because this property was supposed to be a sequel at one point with Sigourney Weaver, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
and
which
was
I'm glad
supposed
that didn't happen.
it was supposed to then be a prequel, that was going to continue the Covenant stuff. It was going to be its own separate thing. This movie doesn't know what it wants to be. And that's the scary thing
No,
about it.
it feels so empty to me. And
Yeah.
as you said, every other movie, for better or worse, does have like some kind of ambitious swing to it. Even like Alien Covenant, I don't really like that movie, but I like some of the concepts that they have. And it might not all come together very well, but at least it is going for something. And this is the one movie in this series that just has felt like it didn't want to have anything interesting to say. And I feel like that is a complaint of a lot of these series that and these franchises that quite honestly just have been around for so long that there's not really much else to do with them other than try your best to have some decent spectacle. But outside of it, people just don't really care. And I think that people recognize like the alien creature that will always be just so stunning and will always have a place in the culture. But how much mileage you can get out of that, in a couple years, that will be a 50-year-old movie that people will be referencing. And I don't know how much staying power that's going to really have in the culture if you're not doing anything more than just the bare minimum. And so many of these other franchises get to that point where they're just referencing the creature, but not doing anything to make the story or the characters all that endearing at the same time.
I just want to see Hollywood start making original ideas. I know that sounds crazy, but like
That is a tall order.
it is a tall order because I feel like with Twisters, with this, Deadpool Wolverine, Bad Boys 4, even the Planet of the Apes movie that I liked, uh, Furiosa, which I liked. Like I know I'm also part of the problem because I like those movies, but ultimately, Josh, I feel like I sound like an old man right now, and it's just is. But it's like when these movies came out, like when Alien and Aliens came out, especially Aliens, there were still a lot of great original movies that came out in that time too. IP was
Yeah.
being created. We don't have that anymore. Like I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking about, people have been already asking like, what's going to be the next Barbie Oppenheimer? And I feel like studios should strike while the iron's hot and not make sequels to Barbie and definitely not making a sequel to Oppenheimer, but should try to make movies like that audience want to see, to make these events, to make these cultural events, to try to give these directors some real creative visions instead of
But that
instead of just the continuing of these franchises that like when Harrison Ford is retired, right? And we get the next Indiana Jones movie. Who's going to give a shit about that? Like who's going to give a shit about seeing that? Or honestly, based off of the reaction of Downey being Doctor Doom, who's going to give a shit about those movies, really? Even though they'll make a ton of money, like there'll be a lot of people that have a lot of bad things to say about it. And it just feels like Marvel is our IP, if that makes
yeah.
sense, of our generation, but it's based
Well,
off on
yeah.
other people's generation.
It is the
And
IP, but also like people are kind of getting tired of that too.
yeah,
And the studios have just sort of put themselves in this corner where they relied so much on IP being the driving force of why people would go to see something. But once you get tired of that, they did not do the work to invest in any of the backup, like your movie stars or your directors. Like nobody cares about that anymore. And it's not very encouraging looking into the future.
no. I think that also a movie like this and the problem this has is amplified by, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but this is amplified when it is a down summer or when it is a down year. Like this is a down year. Like don't get me wrong, because of the strike, because movies were pushed back, because we don't have like maybe some great blockbusters to lean on in more modern franchises.
Well,
Like a
also, if you're
movie,
comparing it to last year, like Barbenheimer is an unprecedented phenomenon that you could never have predicted in the first
Yeah.
place. So
But even
it's
still,
always
like,
going to come up short.
even still, there was like there was a Mission Impossible movie in there, and there was some, we had John Wick from, and stuff. And like those are franchises that are still within our lifetime, I guess you could say, rather than, like
Yeah.
Alien was invented before you and I were born. You know what I mean? So it is fascinating to see how this will go forward and how the baton will be passed to the next person. I don't necessarily know what Fede Álvarez does next. I would assume hopefully maybe something of the horror realm and something more original. Definitely not another one of these. He had some inventive kills. I mean, like the pregnancy scene towards the end of the film was eye opening, but it's also not. But again, like after you see the Numi Rapace one,
That exactly. It's like,
the chest
okay,
burster scene is a little bit more crack the chest open, but it's not as
I liked
revolutionary
the
as that
ship
one.
crashing from after that. Like I liked that set piece in
Yeah.
regards to the chest burster. I didn't like how basically everybody survived from that because again, it felt like a little video gamey, almost
Well, I
like
mean, like
an amusement park ride, you
she's
know?
pregnant and she like jumps off and falls down, and there's no repercussions to any of that. And
Yeah.
there's some weird, just
And
like
that asshole character too, like the cousin, like was so annoying. I
so
understand he
annoying.
was written to be that way, but even still,
I
he
want to
fell down and the acid was dripping on him. I was like, why didn't you? That was so annoying. Why didn't he
get
move?
up. Yeah.
The acid is slowly dripping onto you. Just roll over in any direction. Why are you just staying there?
Just, I'm telling you, they are really dumb characters written in this
Yeah, but that is
movie.
like a level of dumbness of like
Dumb.
Darwin Award level. You know? Like you're too stupid to live if you can't roll out the way of slowly dripping acid onto you.
That's fair. That's fair. No, again, I was sitting there, and I guess this is also just the world we're living in too, where like everybody had seen it before I did, and I walked in. I didn't walk in with really any expectation other than like, let's just see what an alien movie is. Let's see what this thing is. And I was just also kind of astonished by the sheer celebration, or I guess the high praise that it was given, because it is such a middling film. And yeah, to see like it has, I think this is another broken part of our system where like this has a higher rating
Yeah.
on RT. And I think I talked to you about this before, but it's like this has a higher RT rating and Metacritic score and stuff like that than something like Trap, which is, I say
Yeah,
what you
the
want
fact
about
that
him.
this
Say what you want about M. Night Shyamalan. He's at least trying to do something different. God forbid if we did that, in
oh no,
cinema.
Trap is a better movie than
Yeah.
Alien Romulus. And like the fact that that
Cool. I got
movie
Josh on my side. Sweet.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
But like the fact that Alien Romulus yeah debuted with like what a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, like, and I
Baffling.
say that as somebody who wrote a review that was mixed positive on it, but like
Yeah.
that is the ultimate failing with Rotten Tomatoes is like if everything is on a pass fail basis and most people can be like, yeah, it's not that great, but I had like a decent time with it. I guess I can mildly recommend it. Then it makes it seem like, see, everybody loves the movie. It's like, no, it's just everybody kind of gave it a slight pass, but that doesn't mean people loved the movie.
I've been saying this for a while, but I think Rotten Tomatoes should go from it being 60 to 75. Meaning that if you're below 75%, if you're below a C plus, I guess,
I mean,
then you should be rotten. I think
I
no,
still
no, no.
don't
It
mind.
should,
Yeah.
because I think that then that would only incentivize, I think, studios, and I think maybe even creatives to like be like, well, we made this hunk of junk and it still didn't even, like, you know what I mean? We like all the money in the world
Yeah.
cannot help us out there a little bit. Also, too, I just think that like, we shouldn't have a standard in this country of grading, even for
Well,
critics
there's
to
that too.
be 60%. My God. Like we should
Well,
have a little bit of a higher standard in terms of a grade point average here,
well,
folks.
I don't mind necessarily like 60% still being like on the positive side because in my perspective, it's like that's still like majority. So you're still
Yeah.
leaning positive, even if you're mixed on it. I just feel like the freshness should be maybe quantified a little bit more specifically. And I know they try to do that a little bit with like fresh versus certified fresh, but it feels like more so if you're in the 60 range, that should be like I don't know. Now you're
Honestly,
talking more about like it's Metacritic. It's just a failing of Rotten Tomatoes, just in general.
yeah.
The binary of is this good, is this bad?
But then it, but
Not,
I think
like
it,
not a new argument,
but I think
honestly.
it coats then any of a movie like this mistakes to say, well, if people loved it, it was 97 on Rotten Tomatoes. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think that reads well on a headline, but you know,
But you know what? It's not
it's
even
a,
a new argument because this is the same thing that people were talking about
I
with
know,
Siskel and Ebert, the whole thumbs up, thumbs down thing. And even
I know.
they were saying like there is more nuance than just whether you give something a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And they were
Yeah,
the
but
creators of it. So
I think it's a little bit worse than thumb up, thumb down because at least that was two people, and it's like okay,
and they
those are
admitted
two.
their biases
Yeah.
and the flawed nature of their system. And that's why they had a whole television show to argue the nuances of what their opinions
Hmm.
were. You don't have
Exactly.
that when everybody just posts their shit up on RT and it's just, is it good or is it bad? That's all that people want to know.
I just feel like also too, people just want to give stuff passes sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that.
It feels
Also,
like
people,
there was a big like just entire section of people this week that just gave this thing a pass. But we're not that same way 2 weeks ago when Trap came out, but we're definitely still the same way in a different way when Deadpool came out. It's fascinating to see when people give things passes, Josh, and when people don't give things. And
or when
it's
people decide that their mixed review actually should be quantified as a fresh review on Rotten
yeah.
Tomatoes. When it's like you gave this movie a C plus and it's a fresh rating.
No, you
Okay.
gave it a C plus and you gave it a rotten rating. You know what I mean? Like that's when it's like, what? You know what I mean? That doesn't make any
I
sense.
don't know. I mean, C plus to me, I understand it's like a middle ground, but a C plus does not sound like a good movie to me.
No, a
It
C.
doesn't sound like a
Well,
movie I would recommend to people if I would give
I
it a
would
C
say
plus.
this though: if some of these movies were actually in the 50s and 60%, I actually want to go see them more because I would want to
Yeah, because then
know.
that's like an honestly divided
Yeah, it's an
reaction.
honestly
Yeah.
divisive film.
And that can
You
be
want to
more interesting to
explore that.
watch. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's honestly, we got Sophia in the door to watch Trap because she's not a big Shyamalan person. And she's just like, that's what everybody's so angry about. I'm like, welcome to my world, folks. You know what I mean? Welcome to where I've been this entire. But then there's also some truly just awful movies. Like I'm not going to defend fucking Borderlands. You know what I mean? Like that's just a stupid
I'll
idea.
take your word for it because I have not seen it and I
I'm never
never
going to see
will.
it. No,
Yeah.
I know that it's been panned and everything. So, um, Josh, anything else you want to say about the Alien franchise, Romulus, State of Cinema, my favorite color?
Uh, just Justice for Resurrection.
Yeah. Josh, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color.
Yeah.
Does black count as a color?
Yeah.
Okay, then it's black, as you
Same.
can see on the screen for me right
Yeah.
now.
All right. Well, I just want the audience to know a little bit more about Josh Parham every single episode. Maybe I'm going to start doing that. Just throw a question to you at the end. You're not going to see coming. What do you think?
Okay,
What do you think?
I'll prepare myself for
Is
it
that
next time.
scary? Is it too scary for you? Ask
It's
a.
scarier than anything in Alien Romulus.
That's fair.
Yeah.
See, I just wanted to provide you a little bit of terror at the end of this episode. I don't think that that's wrong.
It's like a real alien movie. You think it's about to end, and then they get you with the last jump at
Exactly.
the
I just
very
chest
end of it.
bursted right
Yeah.
out of the screen just to give
You,
be
you
like,
think Ripley's alone in the ship, and then bam, there it's off in the corner. One
it's like,
last little bit.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, like, hey, Josh, what's your favorite kind of food?
God, I love Mexican food.
Yeah, I like that. Same. I've grown up with it.
Mm.
It's nothing better than a hot plate of beef fajitas. I'm sorry.
Oh,
This morning I had not to get behind the curtain, folks, but like I had, I had breakfast tacos this morning, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Listen, you can get rid of pretty much a lot of bread in my life and bad carbs and stuff. I'm never getting rid of homemade flour tortillas. That's just not going to happen. It's just
I
not
love
going to
them
happen."
on nachos. I love beef nachos. Put cheese on it. I will do both the beef and the
Chicken?
chorizo.
Oh,
No, I put chorizo on it
oh,
too,
you
and I
put
put
chorizo. Oh,
with melted cheese on it, and then pico, guacamole, sour cream.
oh, you got to do the sour cream, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I can give it or take it. Usually leave it, but that's fine.
I mean, it's not necessary. Like if there's no sour cream, it's fine. But I like a little bit of sour
Do
cream on
you
it
do
too.
you have some hot sauce like on the side with it too? Still do even
It
after with the pico?
depends. Like usually I feel like it's good enough, but like I might put a little bit of hot sauce on there too. And then maybe just a dash of salt just as well. And those are my loaded nachos. That's what I usually do for Mexican food night.
I love it. I love it. See, learning more about each other as we're doing this show. Josh, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at JR Parham, and you can find all of my work over at Next Best Picture and Awards Watch.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we have this one called Director Watch. It's a pretty good one. We're just starting our Terrence Malick movie series. This week's episode, we'll be talking about Days of Heaven. Good movie. And 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. Greatly appreciate that. While you're over on the website, sign up for the newsletter. Next week's show, we will be previewing the Telluride Film Festival. We're right around the corner, Josh. Film Festival year. That means it's Film Festival time of the year, I guess you could say. And that means we're going to see all these movies. We're going to start talking about them. Then we're going to start talking about the awards. It's the fall. We're excited.
It's already here.
Josh, do you have a most anticipated movie of the fall of the festival season?
Queer.
Queer?
Yeah.
That's like the number one, I think, from the entire staff.
I feel like that is the case. It's not a very unique answer, but like what else can I say?
It's not
like,
here.
Obviously.
What's your least anticipated film of the upcoming
My
slate?
least anticipated.
Yeah. Say it. Come on.
It's probably A Complete Unknown.
A Complete Unknown. That's fair.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know. Were you trying to say that not to hurt my feelings or something?
No, I was going back and forth between two, but like, because I almost said Joker, but to be honest with you, like, I'm morbidly curious about Joker. Like, I don't think it's gonna be good, but I'm at least curious about it. There's nothing that makes me curious about A Complete Unknown. Like, I know exactly what that movie is going to be, and I can't imagine it being something I'm going to love.
I mean, why do we need to make a Bob Dylan movie when we have I'm Not Here? Right? Which is gonna be, yeah. I think I'm starting to lean more towards Wicked. I'm not looking forward to that. I think it.
Well, you see,
I know you're there for Jonathan Bailey.
Well, not even like Jonathan Bailey is a very big plus, don't get me wrong. But I am also like fascinated with Wizard of Oz. Like,
yeah,
the Wizard of Oz just as a property is something that I have seen so many different interpretations of. It was my favorite movie as a kid, and like literally direct-to-video cartoons, community theater plays, like action figure booklets that I would get, like anything that was related to the Wizard of Oz as a kid, I was like, give it to me. I need it. So
sounds like somebody's doing the review for Awards Watch. What I'm saying. Sounds like,
look, I am going to see that movie regardless. I'm going to be very excited to see it. Like I saw Oz the Great and Powerful in theaters. Like you put
so you're
anything,
you're like me, the 4 people that saw it.
Anything that is related to the Wizard of Oz, I will go and see because I love the Wizard of Oz.
Have you seen Wicked on stage?
Like years ago. It has been a very, very long time, but I have seen it on stage. I think it was a graduation present for me from high school. So that was like in 2008. So it has been a minute since I've last seen it. But yeah, it was Wizard of Oz related. So I was going to watch it.
Yay or nay on it?
On Wicked? I mean, I remember liking it. It's just, I don't remember that much from it, but I remember it being good and having a good time with it.
It looks like a mess, so I can't wait to see it. And yeah.
But you know what? Nathan Crowley's doing the production design on it, and I'm going to root for him to win an Oscar.
I think, honestly, though, I think it's here. I can't stand that camera's in the middle of the corner of the room. It's
I mean, it's an interesting idea. I can't imagine it's going to work, but it's I'm curious.
It's Robert Zemeckis' Tree of Life, and it looks stupid. That's what it just looks like.
Yeah, well, as somebody who
don't do it.
Is not
don't do it.
Slavishly devoted I heard about the Church of Malik on your Badlands episode, so I am not converted to that church, so I don't. That description does not, push me away as much as it would for other people.
Do have some brochures for you at the end of this taping.
No, I
Uh,
heard Jay's insinuation of dragging Chloe Zhao, so he's on my
oh,
shit list for
oh
that.
shit! All right, you guys have already started it with that 99 series. Good God, the both of you. For the record, folks, they do like each other a lot.
Yes,
They
yeah.
do like each other a lot. They're friends.
I
God
might have to
damn.
legitimately apologize for the Daily Wire.
I wouldn't want you to. It was one of the best episodes we've ever done. Yeah, I think it's queer or the room next door is pretty high up there because it's Pedro. And
Oh yeah, I love Almodovar.
we're gonna talk about those. We're gonna talk about other movies because those probably aren't and definitely aren't going to tell you right. So we'll talk about all those next week. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.